and a very warm welcome to all of you today. My name is Mike Bell, and I'm the Chair of South West London Integrated Care Board. This is the first of our AGMs as South West London Integrated Care Board, and we'll be covering two particular items today. The formal business in relation to the closure of the CCG, which operated for the first 3 months of the last financial year, and then the 9 months following that, which saw the statutory establishment of the Integrated Care Board, and we'll be signing off the annual report and accounts for this organisation as well. I'd like to introduce the panel members to you. So if I could first of all introduce Sarah Blow, our Chief Executive, Helen Jameson, our Chief Financial Officer, Karen Broughton, who is our Deputy Chief Executive. They will all be making presentations during the course of today. I'm also really pleased today that we have two of the innovative projects that we've supported as an ICB in terms of tackling health inequalities across South West London. So we'll be hearing from Dale, who's the Chief Executive from Battersea Minds, Young Battersea Minds, and Tim, who is the Chief Executive of SPEAR, which works with homeless people. And we'll be also hearing from some of their service users as well, which I think is a really exciting idea for this AGM. In terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting fire alarms today, so if the alarm does sound, please walk calmly out of the doors marked fire exit. There is a hearing loop available. If you haven't already connected to the hearing loop, please, at the back, you'll be able to get that facility operating. We'll be taking questions from members of the public at the end of the meeting, and thank you to those people who sent questions in advance, but I'll be happy to take questions from the floor at the end of today's meeting. Today's meeting is being broadcast online, and it is going to be recorded and will be posted online subsequently. Anybody who would like to opt out, I think you've all been asked if you'd like to opt out of photos, but if you would like to, please talk to our colleagues at the back of the room. You will also have received registration for our annual report summary for you to take away. There are some copies at the back, and what I'd also like to do is draw your attention to these QR codes. You can get all of the documentation by just scanning these QR codes and following the link. And that way we will be making our contribution to environmental concerns by not printing lots and lots of papers. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our Chief Executive, who's going to look back on the past year, and we will be taking her that as our annual report. So thank you. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Mike. Ooh, here we go. So, welcome everyone to South West London. Really nice to see you all. I'll just pop mine there. There we go. So, as Mike said, we actually became an integrated care system on the 1st of July 2022, and we're looking at the year to April 23 from April 22. So partly a CCG for 3 months, and the rest of the year we were an integrated care system. The integrated care system replaced the CCG, but also we do a lot of additional work differently to the way CCGs worked. So we are very much a partnership. We very much want to work with our partners both in health and care, voluntary sector and local communities. And really important for us that we work very closely with our patients and our public, because actually they're central to everything that we do. So we have 4 aims. I'll go backwards, I'm not keeping an eye on it. Improving outcomes in population health and healthcare. That's a different type of requirement than CCG's had. Tackling inequalities in outcomes, experience and access. Enhancing productivity and value for money, and helping the NHS to support broader social and economic development. Okay, so there are a number of different parts to our system, as well as the partnership, which is a wider partnership with our colleagues from local authorities and the voluntary sector and others. We have an integrated care board that brings together all of the different parts of the NHS in South West London, as well as local authority representatives, and we do have some people that join us from the voluntary sector and from Health Watch in our board, and I can see them here today. Welcome. So what we will be doing is looking at what is the role today of the ICB, which is the statutory body for the NHS, and what we have done over the last 9 months, as well as looking at what we did as a CCG. And the CCG was actually a merger of 6 borough-level CCGs in South West London into one South West London CCG, and actually was working all through the COVID pandemic and the first 3 months of the period that we are looking at. And although we have a different role as an ICB than the CCG, we're trying to keep all of the really good work that was achieved through South West London CCG as part of what we do as we move forwards. Okay, so we are actually considered a high-performing system in London, in South West London. We do really well against performance targets for the NHS. We have some of the best outcomes around elective surgery. So if you need to have an elective operation in South West London, you will tend to get seen quicker than you will in many other areas. We also have good outcomes for cancer. We're one of the best in the country for our cancer delivery and our cancer outcomes. And we also make sure that we deliver on things like our prevention requirement, and vaccine delivery has been a big thing as part of both COVID, but also now post-COVID, we're looking at flu and other immunisations as well as COVID going forwards. So it's a challenging time in the NHS, so we do well in South West London, but it is really hard at the moment. We've got a lot of industrial action going on. We're just about to come into the winter. We're still on catch-up from COVID. We still haven't yet caught up from when we had to cancel lots of operations during the pandemic. So I don't want to suggest that even though we're doing quite well in South West London, that there isn't a big challenge for us and for our providers across the NHS. But what I would like to do is to just give you some examples of some of the good things that have happened in South West London since we became an integrated care board. So I've tried to pick one from each of our boroughs, so I've got 6 of them, and I'll try and be brief because I know you don't really want to hear from me, but I know you'd much rather hear from our community colleagues. So the first one is diagnostics in Kingston, and we did invest 2.1 million in new diagnostic services. And what that's meant is that extra funding means we've delivered 10,000 more tests per year for cardiology and respiratory conditions, and that's really positive for local people. In cancer, we have a partnership that's called Royal Marsden Partners, and it involves all of the partners in South West London from primary care, from our acute colleagues. And they've worked in partnership with the Croydon BME Forum and the Agent Resource Centre to bring awareness to those local people. All the evidence shows that black people are significantly less likely to be diagnosed with cancer, and actually going out and talking to those populations and letting them know what's available means that we can actually diagnose more of those cancers and treat them early. So another area that we have positively moved forward on across the whole of South West London is virtual wards. But particularly, can I say, in Sutton, really good job with Sutton Health and Care, Epsom St Helier Hospital, local GPs, working together to make sure that people can be discharged from hospital into the community and still monitored, often through digital means. Not only does it mean they get discharged early, but they're also supported in their homes so they're not readmitted into hospital. And we're also looking at whether or not we can prevent admissions with our virtual wards. I think that it means that the hospital stays are reduced by 2 or 3 days by allowing people to be transferred into the community rather than kept in a hospital bed. And then hospital within a hospital, Croydon Hospital have been running a new model, which means that they can do all of their operations, electives, in the hospital, but it's a hospital within a hospital with a separate entrance. It means their infection prevention control is really, really good, and it means that people coming to A&E don't impact on their ability to deliver operations and having to cancel. And it's well known nationally as being a really fantastic model, and it means that we have managed to do more operations in South West London because of it. New roles in primary care, I don't like, what is it called, Rs, I have to be careful how I pronounce that one. What that means is that you will be seen in primary care in South West London, possibly not by a GP, but maybe by a clinical pharmacist or by a paramedic. And one of the examples that we've also got is care coordinators who work within general practice and can support you not just with your clinical needs, but also maybe directing you to support around cost of living, whether or not you need some mental health support. And one of the really good examples of that is Wideway Practice in Merton, where they have care coordinators that support people through lots of different pathways within the NHS and within local health and care. And then finally, my last example is around MHIP. So this is the service in Wandsworth that we work in collaboration with our local community. So it's the Ethnicity and Mental Health Improvement Programme, and it was set up to make sure we address all the unequal access that we have. And working with MHIP, what we've done is made sure we have these hubs where people can access service, they can access mental health support, working closely with South West London and St George's Mental Health Trust. And it's a drop-in service, and we've been talking to the local communities about the opportunities and how they can access these services. And this has been a really positive for the local community. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Helen to do the exciting stuff, which is all about the money.
Thank you, Sarah. So I just wanted to give you an overview of the finances for the year. So that will include, as Sarah said, the CCG accounts for the first 3 months of the year, as well as the ICB accounts for the last 9 months of the year. So I'm really pleased to say that for both sets of accounts, the auditors were really pleased to give us a true and fair view to say that they'd been properly prepared in line with international accounting standards and the requirement of the Department of Health. And that we did deliver all the targets that were set for us from a financial basis, so we have lots of green ticks on the slide. So what did we spend this money on that the ICB has been funded? So you can see here on the slide that both the CCG and the ICB have tended to spend their money in a similar proportions. That we actually spent the £3 billion over the year. So that we have spent the £3 billion over the year on supporting our population. That's for them to have both treatments within South West London and where necessary to go to other providers outside of South West London, such as specialist trusts to get specialist treatment. And from this we can see that around 70% is spent within South West London itself, and of that about 54% is being with acute services. So what did we get for this spend? We can see here that we've managed to deliver more operations for our patients than in the previous year, which is great news as we talk about coming out of the pandemic and needing to support treating patients that didn't manage to get the treatment at that time. And as we've said, we're continuing to progress that and push that further to make sure that we can see as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, in the right locations in the right way. We've had over 700,000 GP face-to-face appointments with those funds, and we've continued to develop doing things virtually as well. So what are some of the key investments that we've made? Well, in line with some of the things that Sarah's already talked about, we also made sure that we invested for the winter during the year to make sure that we could improve our infrastructure in the number of beds we had and the resources we had to be able to support patients at times when they needed more help. We've made sure that we've invested in virtual wards and in community services to be able to support people with the right care in the right place at the right time. And we've developed those R's roles as we described already. And key to all of that, rather than just dealing with the here and now and treating the patients that are presenting and require care, we've made sure that we've invested in health inequalities and looked at how we can prevent things as we go forwards. And I think for us as a system, that's really, really important about how we try to continue to improve things for our patients. And it's really important that we continue to make those investments to improve the quality of care for them. So that's what we've done as an ICB, as we've worked with the system to do that. But as we've already said, an ICB has a slightly different role than a CCG. And as part of that, that is about coordinating the care across the whole system and having a responsibility for the coordination of those finances. So the finances for South West London as a system are around £5 billion a year. So that relates to the funds and expenditures spent by the individual hospitals within the patch, as well as the funds that the ICB spends on community services and primary care within the patch and on acute services outside of the patch. So this means that this relates to money for treatment for the South West London population, but also other populations that come to South West London to get their treatment as well. And you can see from the slide, this is the breakup of how our organisations have spent the money and the level of money that they spent in year. That was the money to run ourselves, to deliver operations on a day-to-day basis, to be able to see patients in A&E. But what else have we done? We've also got a responsibility for the amount of money that we invest in our infrastructure to make sure that we've got the right buildings, to make sure that we've got the right IT and digital solutions as we go forwards. So we spent over £200 million in year on this as a system, of which 60% was spent on maintaining the current buildings that we have to make sure that we can deliver services from them, and also about maintaining digital services and improving those. We also made some other investments to try and take things forwards. So I think there was a really exciting opening of the Springfield Hospital during the year, which has had great advances in green technology within the building, with carbon-absorbing paint as we go forward. Sorry, that's one of my things I like. And some great community spaces that have been opened over there within the site. We've also had great success by going live with a new electronic patient system at the Royal Marsden Hospital, which has really advanced the way that clinicians can support their patients during treatment, but also opens up patient portals so that the patients can talk directly with the clinicians, and so they don't need to be phoning up or waiting for paper appointments, etc., to really advance care. Further to that, we've made sure that we've invested in the primary care infrastructure. It's really important that we have the digital solutions to support all of those additional roles that we've already talked about that have come in, to make sure those pharmacists and paramedics have the right solutions to be able to support the population in the community. And we continue to develop other sites as we go forwards. So finally, as we look forward to 23-24 as a system, what are we looking to do? So as an ICB, we've set a plan of making a 2.5 million surplus to support the system so that they can use that money to be able to deliver care. As a system, we've agreed a plan with NHS England which will spend slightly more money than we will receive in year, but that's to make sure that we give the best care that we can to our patients. But really key in all of this is how we work together and collaborate to ensure our financial sustainability as we go forwards, and how we work together to make sure we give the best care possible for the least amount of money, so that we ensure value for money in what we do, but make sure that the patients get the best experience they can at the same time. And finally, to come back to the point of this is not just about delivering care for here and now. This is about looking to the future. This is about how we invest in health inequalities and how we make sure we can invest in the prevention agenda as we go forward to make this a better world for everybody. I'll hand back to Sarah.
Thank you. That's a nice segue into the next section, which is around the Innovations Fund. So we actually, last year, we made sure that we made some money available from the NHS budget to partners. And when I say partners, that's everyone. It's the voluntary sector, it's local authorities, other partners in the NHS, to say, actually help us to do something innovative around prevention, around supporting people in the community differently. And for us, it was with a particular focus last year on urgent and emergency care. That was where we said we needed a bit of help during winter. And then there was another pot of money called the Inequalities Fund, where it was specifically focused on the inequalities that we have in South West London. This was not a requirement, this was something that we decided to do in South West London, and we made that money available for local organisations. We've done it again this year. We are working with our integrated care partnership, and we've made money available from the NHS to have a process where people can bid for funds to actually think differently about how we deliver care to our local people. And so I'm really, really pleased to be able to introduce Del, who's come along to talk about one of the bids that was made and is delivered from last year's fund. And I'm just going to hand over, because that's going to be much more exciting than anything I can say. So welcome, Del.
Oh, please. Hello, everyone. My name's Del from Caius House. I'm the CEO of a youth charity that's based in the Battersea area, so we mainly cover that area. And the funding that we were awarded was not just for Caius House. This was a partnership that was built up of a number of organisations covering the Battersea area. And we felt that we was really in a good place to be able to deliver the project that we brought forward because of our existing relationships. We all work with young people, we know the area. Most of us have been around for over 50 years, so we felt it was really, really a good match. So we was very happy when this fund became available, because we felt we was already in a position to be able to convincingly put something forward. So I'll tell you a bit about why we felt we was in the right place. As I mentioned, established organisations, a track record of working with young people. We had the staff with the knowledge and the skills, and we had also been working to address mental health within our organisations. On the ground, we have seen young people expressing their feelings and their thoughts around mental health, and also we were noticing the challenges that they were facing. Already, Caius House had 2 trained counsellors in post, and we were happy to be able to expand the offer so that it covered all of the organisations within the patch. We work with mostly Black and Asian young people, around over 75%, and we felt that we would work with the young people where they felt comfortable. Some of them had expressed concerns or maybe a reluctance to maybe attend appointments if they were at a GP's or if they had to go to Springfields. So we felt that maybe we could provide some of the services in-house in a place where they felt comfortable, where they were walking in and they just looked like they were any other young person walking into a youth club setting. Sorry. So what we was expecting from the project, and just to put it into context, this was for a 3-month period, so the funding was received in January through to March. So we felt that we could early recognise when young people were struggling, because we was actually working with them. And we could then send them straight forward through our referral system to counselling. We could help build the emotional literacy and resilience of the young people by incorporating good techniques within all of our everyday activities. So when I talk about that, we might have FAST that's delivering football training, but they would make sure that there was a time to speak, to chat, to share, and everyone would have that built into their activities. And we would give them the support that they needed to have well-being and almost provide them with a toolbox so that even if they didn't need it now, when they did need it, they already had some of the skills in place. And we wanted them to be able to speak freely about their mental health and how they were feeling, and to break down any stigma. So in the 3 months I spoke about, we had 501 young people attending some of the sessions that we had across the organisations. 233 sessions were delivered across that time. 20 were supported to be young mentors, so we trained them up, gave them more training so that they could work with their peers and be there as a support. 78 attended either group art therapy or individual therapy. We've trained up within the community, not just the the 6 or more organisations there, but also anyone in the Battersea community could put someone forward with their organisation to be trained up as a mental health first aider. And so we felt that that again would spread just the knowledge across the patch. And then we had 12 events across the time where we could actually spread the word a bit more about what we were doing and the services that are available. Apologies, I did have a young lady who was going to attend, but unfortunately she's unable to. But I just wanted to give you a kind of insight into one of the areas that we was able to help. So we had a young gentleman who had been involved in the youth clubs maybe since the age of 10. And he would be maybe at one youth club on a Monday, another one on a Tuesday, another one on a Thursday. And we all knew this young gentleman. Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond his control, he ended up having to go into prison. And what was brilliant was, even though we was able to support him while he was in prison, when he came out, straight away we was able to provide him with counselling, just to check on his knees, check that he was okay, check that he was able to move forward. And I think that we were able to really adapt and be there for him when he needed it. So in summary, it was a brilliant opportunity to be able to run this project. We felt that the Innovation Fund truly was an the Inequalities Fund truly was a fund that enabled us to go out there and to carry on delivering what we knew worked, and to also give us the scope to try new things and see what we can do to make it better. We learnt by gathering data, we learnt the art therapy sessions, we needed more of those, the counselling, how we can make sure that we broke down any barriers to what counselling was. The impact was huge. Young people were talking about it, young people were feeling safe. The level of engagement, I think there was one appointment that was missed, but there was reasons for that appointment being missed. So again, it's really good to have that engagement. And I think the opportunity to grow. So even one of the events, we started off with the organisations on the first screen, but by the time we got to the 12th event, we're bringing in even more organisations from the area. So we see that this is able to grow. So, yep, thank you very much.
Del, that was fantastic, and I think it just goes to show what small pots of money, what a difference they can make. And I'm pleased to say we'll be continuing with innovation funding moving forward, identifying those projects where we can make a huge difference, but also where we can learn. Because one of the things about this project is that we'll be taking lots of that learning, and that will help us change and improve some of our mainstream services as well. So a really, really powerful example. The next piece of work, I think, is just as exciting. So if I could ask Tim Fallon to come forward. Tim.
Thank you, Mike. Great. So I'd like to talk to you about the project that was funded by the ICB for us, which was a digital inclusion project. And again, like the one that Del was talking about, it was for a fairly short term. It was for 3 months, and it was really a pilot project for us. So just tell you a little bit about SPEAR. We're a homelessness organisation, and we work across 5 of the 6 boroughs that the ICB works in. And our main focus is on working with people who've got a history of rough sleeping. So most of the people we work with are rough sleepers now, or they've been a rough sleeper at some time in the past. And we've developed this sort of pathway model that we work with people. So our first point of contact with people is often when they become rough sleepers. We have outreach teams that go out. They go out in the middle of the night. They go out early morning. They find people that are sleeping rough in those 5 boroughs. We engage with them, and we try and then start them on a pathway towards housing and towards independence. So we have a number of projects that support that. One of the ones that's quite a useful background to this project is what we call the Homeless Health Link project, or Homeless Health Link service. It's often the case that services for homeless people don't necessarily address their health needs. So we've tried to make sure over the last few years that we do that we recognise those health needs and we try and address them. And this project we're going to talk about did that as well. I think it's quite well known, you'll have to tell me, but it's certainly well known to us that if you've got a history of rough sleeping, often there's a horrible word, entrenched. If you've been rough sleeping for a long time, it has really significant impacts on your health, your mental health, your physical health. So if we're working with people that have been homeless and rough sleeping for a number of years, they have very significant health needs. They have chronic health needs, they have complex health needs, often which have been unaddressed for many years. So that's what those are the people that we're trying to work with and support. We found in this project 5 specific issues that people had to address, and address wasn't intended as a pun. So address is still a big issue. We do find in our experience that when people present to GP practices and others, if they don't have an address, they can still be turned away. So there is a sort of assumption that if you don't have an address, that you're not eligible to receive services. Now, that's obviously not true, but we have had to work to support people without an address to get access to services. Money, access to finances is an issue. So if you want to engage with services, we have quite a lot of our homeless clients don't have a mobile phone. They can't afford the credit on the phone. They can't afford the cost of travel. So trying to engage with services where you need some kind of funds to buy the things that you need or to have a Wi-Fi connection. So if you don't have the money, you can't access those services, even digitally. A lot of the people we work with don't know what information is available, they don't know how to access it, so they're not able to find out for themselves what they need to do. And there can often be a real confidence issue. People that we've been working with can sometimes have low self-esteem, they can sometimes feel that they don't deserve the services that are available, and they're very reluctant to approach them. And there can also be an issue about trust, that people may have had previous experiences that make them very nervous about any kind of statutory organisation, and that they don't want to approach. So we try and address all of that. So in this particular project, the aims were to increase digital access to primary healthcare by providing people with skills, confidence and support. So it was a combination of things. We did provide equipment. We got some match funding to buy equipment for people. So it was a combination of the equipment itself, developing skills, developing confidence, and together that would help people access things better digitally. And that was the aim for the individuals, and we hoped through that would reduce the pressure that they were putting on the NHS, so that we did find often in our services that people were presenting to A&E when they had acute conditions, which if they could have been prevented or dealt with earlier, that wouldn't have happened. So that was one of the express aims. And so overall, the project's outcomes we were trying to achieve, and it was, as I say, just a 3-month project during the winter period. So we wanted to reduce the pressure on NHS urgent and emergency care, deliver a preventative model of support which promoted self-care and self-knowledge, and it would align to the priority which the NHS has about trying to overcome digital exclusion. I'm never sure whether to say digital inclusion or overcome digital exclusion, one or the other. So these were the things that we tried to do, that we wanted to support inclusive access, reduce demand on healthcare, both on the admin teams, the people that you might gatekeep in this service, but also doctors and nurses and things like that. So we helped people to set up online accounts, we helped people request repeat medication, which they weren't doing before, we helped people make appointments, we helped people to access health records. Sarah earlier on made reference to the pandemic, and we certainly find that within our services, that the pandemic accelerated a process of making more and more services only available digitally. It's much harder now to present in person, so you have to have these digital skills. So these are the particular things that we wanted to achieve for the group of people we worked with. We wanted to improve their digital skills, improve their confidence to navigate health services online, improve their access to online information. There's a lot of information available online, but if you don't know how to access it, then it's not going to be able to help you. And we wanted to improve people's confidence in accessing that information. So there's a real confidence piece here, and not just having the kit, you need to help people have the confidence to use it. So the project delivery we had 3 specific strands. One was regular and personalised support to a group of 24 rough sleepers to improve their digital skills. So for each of that cohort of 24 people, we gave them all a laptop. We registered them with an email address. I don't think any of them had an email address to start off with. And we then helped them access information that they hadn't been able to access before. We offered them in Strand 2 drop-in support and internet access, so there was a regular occasion they could meet each week to be supported, to see how they were getting on, to give them support to access information. So it wasn't just one session, it was a period of repeated sessions over the 3 months, so people could get used to that and they could develop the support and the confidence. And then finally, we also wanted to because it was a short-term project, we wanted to upskill our frontline staff and volunteers. So we did what you might call a training for training methods. We were helping our own staff to understand better what they needed to do to support people, because this was going to be an ongoing issue for us, how to support people around digital inclusion. And we also produced a sort of how-to guide. This was a guide addressed at rough sleepers, how to set up an email account, how to access, how to use public Wi-Fi, for example. So things that we might all take for granted, people who don't know about those things need help to be able to access them and use them. So this is some of the people. The person first from the right is a guy, Paul, who happens to be in the room. So Paul was actually the project person we took on to help us. So Paul's sitting at the back on the left. So if you want to really know about this project, talk to Paul afterwards, because he ran it. So this is a group of the people that were involved. And this is some of the outcomes. That the project did improve people's digital skills, which helped improve their independence and supported self-care. So 87% of participants reported improved digital skills. 62% felt more confident in knowing how to access health services and information online. So I think I've said that before. So the other thing I should say, by the way, is that we did decide at the beginning of this project to have it externally evaluated. So when we bid for the project, as soon as we were given the funding, we agreed with a set of external evaluators how we were going to evaluate the project. So the evaluation findings here are from the external evaluation that was done. So 24 people took part, 80% of those completing the course said that their digital inclusion project had increased their digital skills, which is great. 62% of those were more confident, and 81% said they felt more confident about using the kit, the sort of devices around digital access. So just to give you a case study, a bit like Del did earlier, you're trying to sort of personalise and humanise these things. So MS was a male client of ours. He'd become homeless. He was a survivor of domestic abuse. That's how he'd ended up being homeless. We'd found him in one of our rough sleeping outreach teams. He had quite significant health conditions. He had a pacemaker fitted, high blood pressure, and he previously struggled with low mood, low self-esteem, and feelings of isolation. So we were able to support him, helped him register with a GP, and supported him to engage with healthcare. He completed the project, and he was encouraged to visit his GP, and he was able to get to a stage where he could order prescriptions online, which he hadn't been able to do before. So that's a quote from one of our workshop participants. I won't read that out, but you can read that. And so one of the nice things about the evaluation was we were able to put all the information about this project online. So if you go to our website, you'll see both a summary of the work that we did in this project, and you'll see a 20-page sort of evaluation. I think you can find it on our website. I think you can also find it on the QR code as well, if you've managed to work everything out. So if you go on the QR code, all the references, including the how-to guide that I mentioned, are there. If you want to know more, then please email me later or speak to me after this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tim. I think that was another really good example of projects that can make a very, very big difference. And as we think through to the future, we know that the challenges around digital exclusion are going to continue. And we also know, I think, which both projects highlighted, that actually often people don't trust the services that we provide. And the work of our third sector partners is absolutely vital in providing a bridge for many of our community into mainstream services, into accessing the healthcare and support earlier that they so often need. So thank you for both of them. We've reflected on the finances, we've reflected on the activity, we've reflected on some of the great projects that have happened in South West London over the past year. We're going to use this as an opportunity now to look forward. So I'd like to welcome Karen, who will be our Deputy Chief Executive, who will be talking us through some of the ideas, some of the plans, some of our aspirations as we move into the future. Karen.
Thank you, Mike. So, where does the NHS and where does the Integrated Care Board get its focus for the next 5 years, Jane? So you've heard some phenomenal things that the NHS and its partners are doing. There are two important documents that were produced this year that give the Integrated Care Board and the NHS in South West London and the partnership our focus for the next 5 years. The first one is on your left, but my right. I'm not very good on left and right anyway, so I think it's that way. But it's the NHS Joint Forward Plan, and it's the 5-year plan for the NHS in South West London. It will do a number of things, not only designed to meet the health needs of our populations, as you can imagine, but also the requirements that the NHS has to deliver in terms of NHS commitments. The second strategy is the Health and Care Partnership Strategy, and that's where we come together with the NHS, local authorities, the voluntary and the third sector and the community sector that you've just heard some inspiring words from today, as well as our Health Watch partners. And I suppose both of those documents are written in a particular way, and the way that they're written is that the needs and the wants of patients and people within South West London are at their heart. So threaded through all of those documents are the needs and the wants, and that's built on the engagement that we've had over the last few years. But if we just spend a minute looking at the NHS then. So the NHS plan, it describes how we are going to not only meet the needs of health, but also you've just talked about the really important priorities for health inequalities and reducing health inequalities that we have. The plan outlines 8 priorities that the NHS will work on together, and they are to move and work more towards the prevention agenda, so to prevent ill health and support people to care for themselves, so to keep well, to reduce health inequalities, to keep people well and out of hospital, and when people need care, that we provide the very best care wherever those people are accessing that service. That we use technology to improve care, but also recognise the potential for digital exclusion to work with those and reduce that as well. To manage our money, Helen just gave you a view of where we are with the financial situation within the NHS in South West London, so really important that we focus on resources and how we use those. Making South West London a great place to work. And then finally, to make sure that the NHS in South West London delivers its element of its partnership requirements. So we have a huge amount of challenges in the NHS, but actually together and working differently, we will move forward in that way in 5 years' time, and the links to all the documents are here as well. But as I said, the needs and the wants of patients and people in South West London are threaded through both documents. When we were writing the Joint Forward Plan, we have a kind of a summary of some of the things that we looked at. So we were informed by 180 reports. We were informed by the views of our partners by just under 600 survey responses, 7 focus groups, just under 300 one-to-one conversations, and a number of outreach engagement opportunities. So huge amount of involvement to make sure that what we actually produced was what people actually needed. If we then move forward, that one, there you go. This was a panel that we put together in an event that we had for our Health and Care Partnership. So the Health and Care Partnership Strategy is the shared strategy for health and care across South West London. It looks again at health needs in our populations. It looks at the agreed priorities that organisations across the health sector, the local authorities, third sector, communities, etc. Want to work on together. And it is now being brought together in a series of delivery plans. And the NHS in South West London will, as I said, will deliver the NHS requirements of that strategy. So in order to do that, we held an action workshop in May. 300 people joined us. We looked at 6 areas of focus. So we looked at how do we collectively work on reducing health inequalities, how do we prevent ill health, working together, particularly around the work that we need to do across health and social care to support children and young people. How do we then also collectively work to have a positive focus on mental well-being across all of our organisations and our communities? How do we really work with older and frail people to keep them healthy and well? And then how do we as a system collectively tackle our workforce challenges. And that was one of the significant areas that we agreed as a partnership that we would work on together over particularly year one. But there are two other themes. So there's an element of equality, diversity and inclusion that comes across all of those 6 areas that we will also work on together. And I suppose the final thing, probably just before handing back, is we know that it's great, isn't it, having these 5-year documents, but if they're not live, then actually they'll be out of date very quickly. So we know that people's needs change, people's wants change. We will make sure that we review the plans annually to make sure that they keep track of what people want us to do, so that we're actually delivering what local people want, and we can make a real positive impact on health and health outcomes.
We're going to show the film, I think.
Oh, are we? Oh, lovely. How do I do that? Oh, okay. Which one? Oh, Charlotte, I don't know. Oh, there we go. Do I have to press anything else? Oh, thank you, Alan.
This is an opportunity to do something very different, to bring together all of us from all different parts of the community, all different sectors, different people and different voices. Today has to be meaningful and it has to have purpose. Above all, it needs to be about action.
I think what's really exciting about this partnership event is that we're bringing people together from public sector bodies, the NHS, local authorities, voluntary sector, but also real community people as well, and thinking about how we can work together to really improve the health and well-being of people living in South West London.
We've got more than 200 people gathered here today, all of them bursting with ideas on how we can work together and make a real difference for the health and care of the population in South West London.
So we sometimes, I think, as professionals assume that we know what's best for patients and for local people, but actually we have to listen to what they have to say to us about what they want and what they need, rather than us telling them what we're going to deliver.
For me, it's really important that we get across the community voice, because we are the community and we are representatives of the community. Whether you're looking at things like long-term conditions or health inequalities, we have the voice of the community, and it's really important to hear that voice, because you can't meet a need unless you know the need.
In terms of looking at inclusivity with young people, in terms of diversity, and I feel like, you know, as a collaborative, we can genuinely make that change for the long term.
The more that we can prevent people becoming unwell, the better it is for them. They can enjoy their life more, but I think we can only really do that if we work together.
Yeah, I feel like my opinions have been listened to today and also respected.
The main thing is, you know, it's all great saying that, oh, we're going to make all this change, but is actually doing this change. A lot of it is to do with funding, but there are a lot of ways, you know, with getting sort of volunteers, people who are more than willing to help young people, and even young people themselves volunteering and helping out. It's just everyone helping everyone, I think, which is a very important thing.
The message I'll be taking away again from today is we've just got to keep thinking about how we can release focus and attention and resources towards prevention and helping people live independently.
I honestly think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do things differently, but we can only do it if we bring together the voices of everyone in the community, not just the people that we're used to hearing, but everyone, because this is about all of us. This is about our young people and their future. This is about our older, more elderly residents and what they want from us. We need to honestly talk to people, listen to people, understand what matters to them, and understand how we can actually put it into practice and make it happen.
We thought you'd enjoy that film, and it was, for those of you who were there, it was a truly, truly exciting day. And I think all of us, particularly sort of my professional team here, heard from people, heard comments from people, ideas from people that otherwise we probably wouldn't have engaged with. And I think our plans in South West London moving forward are more robust, more rooted in the communities that we serve as a result of events like that. And a big thank you to Charlotte and her team for running those events. Really, really impressive. We're now going to move on to questions. I'm very happy to take questions from members of the public that are here today. and we do have a microphone, so if you can signal if you would like to ask a question, we'll make sure that a roving microphone finds you. If I could ask, which they're doing, Sarah, Karen and Helen to join me on the panel. Whilst they're taking their seats, I'd also like to identify the board members that we have with us today. There are a number sitting over here and there. So perhaps if you could all stand up if you're a board member. Thank you. Just useful to, and just because you're not sitting on the panel doesn't mean that we might not direct questions at you. That's the accountability of the ICB board. We've had one written question, which comes from Tony Burton, who is from Mitcham Cricket Green Community and Heritage, and he has asked, are you able to provide an update on progress with delivering the new facility at the Wilson Hospital in Mitcham, including dates in the project plan for community engagement over the building plans on the site, when a planning application is expected to be submitted, when construction is expected to begin, and when it's likely to open. I'm going to ask our primary care lead, Mark Creelman, to address that question. Mark.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Creelman. I'm the place executive for Merton and Wandsworth. Just to say that in terms of the Wilson, firstly to acknowledge that the Wilson has been in gestation for a very long time, and that can be very frustrating for local people. But actually, over the last 18 months, what we have seen is with the inflation increases, we've seen material costs and building costs really extend quite significantly. So in South West London, what we need to do is make sure that the finite capital that we have is absolutely targeted to the right place. So we are doing a prioritisation piece of work for every primary and community estates project that is in the pipeline. That should be concluded in a matter of weeks. And at the same time, I just wanted to say on the Wilson, we haven't been sat on our laurels. So in the Wilson, we have invited commissioned a specialist architect who has come in to work with us on maximising the space. And then secondly, it is cheaper to refurbish rather than rebuild. So we have surveyors in there looking at the option of refurbishment to really, again, maximise space and minimise costs. Those three things pending, there would then be a business case, and that is the point at which it would get the green light from the ICB, and then planning permission would be at the same time. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to know that there is progress. I know it is sometimes deeply frustrating at the pace of development within the NHS. I can't see a flood of hands, so whilst you wait to put your hands up, I'm going to ask Helen to say a little bit about the size of the primary care capital budget, unprompted.
Thank you. So the primary care capital budget is actually quite small in comparison to the total capital budget we have. It's only about £3 million in what's allocated to us from the NHS.
So that sort of gives an indication of some of the challenges that we face in that space. There's a gentleman at the back.
Thank you. My name is John, as I work for Kingston Race and Equalities Council. I've got lots of questions, but I'll minimize it to two. One of the answers I know, but it's good to see the profile of the board and the senior leadership. Southwest London's population demography is about 43 to 50% of black and minoritized communities. What are you going to do to make sure that the board and the leadership team looks like the community that is serving? And just an addendum to that, I like the idea that your second aim is to deal with inequalities. I know that there's a massive reorganization taking place. And what assurance can you give me that you're going to continue the inequalities work that you're doing with the head of inequalities disappearing the end of this month?
So thank you for that. I will ask Sarah to Karen, I think, to come in on some of the issues about how we're planning to work on the EDI agenda and the broader health inequalities question. I do very much accept your challenge around the makeup of the board, and it is one of the areas that I will certainly, as chair, be seeking to actively engage with over the months and years ahead. It is very, very important, and I take your point. It is an area that I think we need to continue to work on within South West London, but it's actually not just the people that sit on the board, it's the decisions that the board make, and it's the way in which we engage with our communities that is absolutely vital. And even if there isn't a change of personnel instantly, what I can give you is the commitment that we will continue and deepen our conversations with our communities, particularly our black and other global majority communities. Karen. Oh, sorry, Sarah, yeah.
Can I say something on the inequalities? So firstly, yes, we had an interim project manager that is due to leave who was working on the inequalities work. What we've decided to do is that I, as Chief Executive, have decided that it's such an important piece of work that I'm going to take on the responsibility personally for the Senior Responsible Officer for Inequalities for South West London. And what we're going to be doing is merging that with some additional resource and support in with our EDI work, our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion work as well. So I've been working with Shola, who is the chair of the Inequalities Board, and we're hoping to be able to bring some work to the Integrated Care Partnership in January about how we're progressing that. So I think that's really giving it more of a focus and sort of raising it up the agenda for South West London. So I wanted to give you assurances around that before I ask Karen to talk about the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion agenda.
Thank you. So I suppose the NHS itself has been working on the equalities agenda for some time, hasn't it? But it still probably hasn't made the impact that we would all want it to do. We are looking to, so if I give you just some examples of the things that we're doing in South West London. So we are looking at how do we make sure that the talent of people coming through is promoted and strengthened. And our EDI lead, Melissa Berry, is just in the final processes of pulling together a development programme that will not only sit in South West London's Integrated Care Board, but actually go across all of our organisations. We are looking at to make sure that we promote and support people as much as we can. If I think about the board, when we appointed the non-exec members for the board, we appointed a headhunter organisation. One of their requirements was to make... make the board and go for a very diverse search. Unfortunately, those people weren't necessarily there, so it's about the pipeline of talent coming through and making sure that we really keep an eye on those people and that we support and develop them. The other thing, and I'm sure you're aware of this, the NHS has something called the Workforce Race Equality Scheme. So each year we can look at our statistics and we can look at where we're doing well, and we can also look at where we need to do better. So we've done a number of actions, taken a number of actions to try and strengthen things. So looking at our diverse interview panels, making sure that we've got more training for people available. It's a whole range of actions that we're taking, but we're not there yet. And I think it will take some time before we do get there. But it's a challenge that both our board and the rest of the NHS are trying to work very hard to work on. But anything else you think we could do, more than happy to talk to you about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Beverly Mason. I'm a local resident, and I'm not connected with the healthcare sector at all. In fact, I work in the heritage and the sports sector as a board member. And this gentleman, you asked the same question that I had in my mind. But I just want to say that because you said that, thank you, Sarah, you said that you've taken responsibility for looking after EDI. I think that's excellent. That comes from the top. But I'd also just like to suggest that there are many sectors who've been doing this work for quite some time around trying to diversify their boards. Indeed, I was a part of a project in 2003 with the Arts Council and the Mayor's Office around this work. there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of things that can be shared and learned amongst the different sectors. And I think that cross-sector working is actually very helpful, because some of the challenges that you might face around access to people with the skills that you need at board level, from across the professions, sometimes people can come from outside of the sector and bring that expertise in and have a fresh perspective that may be able to inform the way the NHS is working, and of course vice versa, from the NHS to other sectors as well. So I can definitely help with some contacts and some leads from a lot of those projects. So I've got a different question now. Thank you. That's if I may just take a bit more time. I'm very encouraged to hear about the Innovation and Inequalities Funds, which we had some examples today of how that work has been really had an impact on the ground at grassroots level. But I'd be very interested to know what kind of investment those two projects had. I don't need to know the specific numbers for each project, but what kind of level of investment for that 3-month period? Are we talking, a couple of thousand, or what kind of range? Because that has an impact on how we feel about, how we think about those investments. Thank you.
Well, actually, it was a reasonably large amount of money, so we put £5 million in to do this work for the Innovations Fund for last year. Obviously, that's not per project. There were over 170 projects that bid and were successful through that, and I think the Inequalities Fund was nearly 3 million. So overall, it was nearly £8 million, so it was quite a lot. And the innovation, we're now calling it the Integrated Care Partnership Priority investment is another £5 million that we're putting in for the next set, so plus the inequalities funding. So that is still a significant amount of money. Part of the problem, we've got problems with that money. Number one, it's not recurrent. We make that available through our we basically take it out, top slice it out of our budgets, and we have got a financial problem for this year. I would like to raise that. Not last year. We did go into deficit as a system, but we are struggling with the finances in South West London. But we still made this money available because we felt that it was really, really important. However, if we spend it and then we continue to spend it, we can't do anything new. So it's really hard because it's finding that ongoing investment, and it's actually trying to do proof of concept and see if we can use different resources in a different way in order to achieve some better outcomes. So, but it's hard. I'm not going to sort of underestimate that.
Can I just clarify my question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I saw that there was a budget of 4.9 million, but what's the average investment per project? That's what I'm interested in knowing about.
They're all really, really different. Can I say they go from like £1 million down to 20,000. So it was really open. The idea was you could have statutory organisations bidding, you could have very small voluntary sector organisations bidding. It was really open, and there was no set amount. What we did try to do, I think we've learned a lot through this process of last year. And when it's only small amounts and small organisations, I think it was quite a rigorous process. It's how can we manage the amount of money and the amount of process that we put in to try and release funds in a way that makes sense.
Thank you. That explains it. Thank you.
Beverly, thank you for your offer earlier, and I'm sure one of my colleagues will want to have a conversation with you to get your details. And that's very, very helpful. Are there other questions? Yep.
Thanks. Liz Mirabel, Chair of Health Watch Kingston. I've been reflecting on community care and where that figures within the picture. I guess I'm prompted by two things. One was going to a very interesting research day at Your Healthcare, which is the community interest company that provides that care in Kingston. But I was also reading from the King's Fund that the reduction in health visiting has been, I think it was about a third, and the reduction in district nursing has been about 24%. And these kind of figures seem to somewhat, and this is national, seem to somewhat go under the radar. And given that community care is such an important part, along, of course, with social care, of the integrated agenda now, I'd just be interested in your comments about how this aspect of the health and care system can be brought up the agenda somewhat more.
Really, really helpful. And the ICB has is very committed to increasing the proportion of its expenditure on community services as opposed to on acute services, on the basis that we want to have a more preventative and rehabilitative healthcare system than one which is just focused upon the acute end of treatment. That said, we have inherited 6 very different models of community care from the previous CCGs across southwest London, and we are working to enhance that. Sarah will be able to give you some more assurance around the work that we're doing in that space, and we may even want to perhaps get a case study of some of the ways in which health visiting is working in one of our places. I'm looking at Matthew from Croydon as I say that. I know he's been working in that space, but Sarah.
So we're doing quite a lot of work in this space. So one is we are looking at what type of services do you receive across southwest London. And what we don't want to do is to impose a kind of southwest London model on everyone, but we do believe that there ought to be a minimum standard of care that you could expect to receive wherever you live in southwest London. So what we're working on is coming up with a specification that sets out this is the minimum requirement in southwest London, and then there will be local nuances and changes to that, but at least we know that everyone will get, you know, a minimum level of service on community. The second part, and that will be a fully integrated, can I say, it's community primary care integrated with our acute hospitals and how we work across the whole system. So really, really important for us that that all works together. The second bit is about investment. I think Mike's already mentioned that we are very keen as an integrated care board to put more investment into community and primary care. Also, there's another area I think that we've identified, which is mental health, because we think we need more investment in mental health as well. It's always really difficult to move money around the system in the NHS because there's always winners and losers in that kind of scenario, because we only have the amount of money that we have, and therefore someone has slightly less if we give more somewhere else. However, we are going to bring a proposal to our November board to talk about a staged approach to maybe shifting resources into that community mental health sector. We have something at the moment called a mental health investment standard, where we invest slightly more in mental health every year, okay, than we do in other services. And what we're looking to do is to do something similar with community primary mental health, so that actually over a longer period we can start to shift the balance into that more preventative place. I should also say, because Helen is sitting next to me and she'll kill me if I don't, is that we've got to get our finances sorted before we can do that. So we can't put additional investment in anywhere until we've actually got a balanced position within our finances, because we just won't be allowed to do that. So we currently have got across the system a deficit position. So we have to sort that out. We have a plan. It's a 2-year plan of which we're in the first year, but we have to do that first before we can start to do the shift.
Thank you. And could we get a little bit of a case study from Matthew? If we've got a microphone for him, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work on health visiting, to pick up the point that Mike makes. That's a piece of work that involves ourselves as the provider of those services. We're integrated in Croydon acute and community, so health visiting is part of our remit. So we're working with the council very closely. We're working with primary care very closely. We're working with our community teams very closely, because that's a service very much that needs to reflect the needs of the place and the local population. So it very much feels something within Croydon, because the needs there are different as they are across the whole of southwest London. But also I think there is some learning from that which we can share then across the wider southwest London, and we can learn from other parts of southwest London. We don't get it right all the time anywhere, and therefore I think one of the keys and one of the benefits of the ICS is to share some of that experience, both the areas where we don't get it right and the areas where we do get it right, and we can share that amongst us around individual places and all get the benefit of that, therefore reflecting the needs of our local areas and also the benefit of collaborating more broadly across southwest London. That's certainly what we're trying to do in health visiting, which has been one of the challenged areas for us in Croydon.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Prabha Shetty. I'm a prolific volunteer, so I live in the borough of Kingston. Now, all the presentations that I saw mentioned different areas, Croydon, Merton, lots of work being done with the community. But what I saw was Kingston had, I know, something really useful about diagnostics. Now, I'm wondering if the NHS, like a lot of other funders, think that Kingston is a leafy borough with very, few or little poverty. So I'm wondering whether Kingston is being left out. My reason for asking also is that the Innovation Fund I applied for some of my charities, but didn't get anywhere. I was ultimately told, not by anyone, is to say that the statutory organizations were given priority. Now, to me, that is not, those of us who run small charities, excuse me, are doing a lot of work for the little money that we get. So I would like people to be thinking about supporting, community groups. Thank you.
We'll go to Sarah.
So number one, the reason why we spoke about diagnostics, we just spoke about different things in the different boroughs, but in all boroughs we have both NHS, voluntary sector and community work going on, so in all boroughs. We've done lots of work on our need and deprivation. I absolutely accept there are some real areas of deprivation in Kingston, as there is in many of, if not all of our boroughs. We have some areas where it's not so deprived, and we have areas where we have real deprivation, and there's some real pockets in Kingston. So I wouldn't want to, you to get the impression that we don't understand that. I think that's really important. Secondly, that is not how we made the decision on the Innovations Fund. It was absolutely based on criteria. Everybody, it was open to everybody. We did not give priority to the statutory organisations. If anything, we probably gave a slight push, if we could, to the voluntary sector organisations and supported them a bit more. So it probably would have been more down to not meeting the criteria that we had last year. There'll be a new criteria this year. We'll be launching that. Do you want to say something on that, Karen?
Probably the beginning of October, we'll do some sessions to launch the next round of those funds. And we'll have some information events so that we can share people. And I suppose the other thing to say about the Innovation Fund was we looked and we reviewed with people that wanted to give us their feedback how that process had gone. And we've made changes to the process this time based on, our first year of running it. It wasn't perfect, but we wanted to do it. So we've learned a lot from the first year. We've put all of those things in to redesign it for the second year, and we'll do some information sessions with people probably in early October to just explain how that's going to run this year.
I'm sure if Joe Farrell, the place lead for Kingston, were here, he'd be wanting to celebrate a whole range of initiatives, and he'd probably want to be talking about the work that he's commenced and plans to take forward around carers in Kingston, which is really, really exciting. And I think we're looking forward to the outcomes of that project because we think it could be rolled out across the rest of South West London. But there are exciting initiatives happening in all 6 of our boroughs, Kingston included.
Hello, my name's Shane Brennan from Staywell, also in Kingston. Just on the question of integration and the financial challenges South West London, well, everywhere faces at the moment, and given the pressure that there is on local authorities, particularly adult social care, which is in real dire straits funding-wise, and obviously you can't control that, I know, but if things go wrong there, it really impacts badly on the health system. And I know resources are really, really important, but I also think that working together, the connectedness, and particularly around integration around leadership is really, really important to convince people to work together, better together, to target those things. Because I think the biggest room we can all develop in, and it's a cheap room relatively, is prevention. And we can do an awful lot more. It's a word that gets battered around a lot. But if we break it down as to what that is in terms of clinical prevention, medical prevention, community prevention, what people do around it, supporting people to live independently and safe at home prevention, we could really make some real inroads, I think, in this part of the world. And that would make a big difference on the acute end of the system.
I think you're absolutely right. And definitely, we will be refocusing our efforts towards that prevention agenda. One of the reasons why we have our different place committees is precisely because of the importance of that relationship with our boroughs, with each of the very, very different social care teams, but also with the wider council in terms of economic development, in terms of workforce, etc. I think Sarah wants to say a few more words.
Yeah, so I was going to probably say, would one of the place leads put their hands up? Because what we've got that is really successful in South West London is a real focus on that place. And actually one of the key objectives for our place leads now is around prevention, inequalities, early intervention, and working in partnership with our local authorities. So James has just stood up, which I always think, well, that must be an indication that I should shut up and he can start talking.
Hello everyone, my name's James Blythe. As well as being Managing Director at Epsom and St Helier, I'm also the Place Executive Lead for Sutton. And just really to build on Sarah's comments, I mean, our focus in Sutton over the last couple of years has been about building that partnership, but not just at borough level, actually taking that down into individual neighbourhoods. So thinking about how the adult social care team, the children's services team, public health team, and then the various health teams, along with the local third sector, can work to really look at the data around population health. We've done initiatives that have specifically focused on loneliness and how we tackle the health impacts of loneliness, on the homeless population, on populations with specific characteristics in terms of disease profile as well. And doing that through, for a population of 200,000 in Sutton, actually doing it through 4 neighbourhoods of about 50,000. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's about creating those partnerships, but within those partnerships, we've got to think about how we free up the time and resources to do things at a very local level and find a way for teams in all of those statutory organisations to both deliver the day-to-day work that they need to for a whole borough, but then also be able to have the space and time to do that work on very, very specific communities. And I think the more that we can build that approach, so in a sense, South West London becomes 6 places, but then a series of neighbourhoods under each of those places as well, with partners working together. And I think talking to other place leads, I think that's very similar to the approach we see across most of our places.
James, thank you. And I'm going to go to another place lead. We heard from Matthew earlier, from James, and now from Mark.
Hello, and it's obviously that's a great example, Sutton, but Merton have a better one, which is we did an initiative called Beat the Street with our local authority partners, which was basically beat boxes around the borough, and you got a card, and it was about making people active. Yeah, and there was lots of studies done about really a number of people who participated did not do physical activity beforehand, and 24,000 people in Merton participated, including our local councillors who had like internal competitions as to who was the most, who got the most beat boxes. So I think you're right, absolutely. When we come together around prevention, we can really make a difference.
Great, thank you for that. And that was a lovely example as well. Can we go back to Kingston Health Watch?
Thanks. I'm glad that you've highlighted the importance of the place agenda, because I think probably all of the 6 health watches would agree with that. I wondered whether and what progress there is on the deliberations of the place committees, at least some form of the deliberations being put into the public domain, because certainly the health watches were keenly aware when we moved from having the 6 CCGs to having a merged CCG, that the South West London level would be in the public domain, but the individual boroughs' deliberations would not be. And I think that has been the case with places. So the issue about the things being in the public domain is an important one for us.
Yeah, so I think there's a slightly different experience across South West London. I will go to Matthew, who's the place lead from Croydon, who will outline the way in which they do it. But if I could first go to Sarah.
So the statutory body is South West London ICB. There's no longer a statutory body at place. therefore it's a local decision what they do in the public domain, and they all do it very differently. Some of them have a particular committee that they do in public, some of them do it through the health and wellbeing boards. Everybody does it in a slightly different way. In Croydon, I know they do a meeting in public, and it depends on where you are. So I would suggest that you talk to your local place lead if you've got concerns about what's in the public domain. But I think all of them do it in a way, either through the Health and Wellbeing Board or through a different route.
Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, just an example, and obviously everybody, as Sarah has just said, has developed their own mechanisms for good reasons. But in Croydon, we have one Croydon Health and Care Board. That includes, in public, the old Trust Board, so the Croydon Health Services Trust Board, the Croydon Place Committee. It also includes social care, mental health, the voluntary sector, primary care, etc. So we do all of that business in public, and that builds on something that we've been doing with the One Croydon Alliance for a number of years. And that is a way of doing it. It works well in Croydon because of the history and the way that we've been working. But as I said in my previous comments, there's a slight danger of therefore determining that everybody must do it exactly the same way. I don't think that's right. I think places need to find their own way to use their mechanism that works in their environment, and that's certainly what we've done. And I'm grateful for Sarah and the ICS more generally for being exceptionally supportive of that, because that's not necessarily seen everywhere, where there is a bit more of a one-size-fits-all approach within ICSs. And I think it's to great credit of South West London that we're able to have a South West London ethos whilst also having some differences within the places, because there are differences, as we well know, between us all.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Were there any other questions? Sorry.
Thank you. Hi, it's Amanda Begley from the Health Innovation Network, who accesses services in South West London. I just wanted to say thank you. Had really fantastic experiences over many, many years for my family and other and friends. So thank you for all your hard work. I just wanted to say I'm very fortunate to work with South West London, and certainly agree with that kind of collaborative approach. Big focus on prevention, health and equalities, mental health, but also the investment in innovation, which is really difficult in challenging financial times. Just hearing about the sort of place-based approach, I just wondered if you wanted to say a bit more about virtual wards, because I think you've got a model that others are looking at in terms of very place-based, but also thinking about what's the most efficient way of running the services and what can you do once for South West London to ensure equitable access through your remote monitoring hub, as well as very local place-based services where you've got local staff delivering care to patients in their own home. I just think it's a really brilliant model.
Amanda, thank you for that, and thank you for highlighting the virtual wards, because I think it is definitely one of the areas where South West London excels. I think not just within London, but actually nationally. Absolutely astounding. Sarah.
Off again. So we do have a single model across South West London. So as you say, we have borough-based approach. However, we have a single monitoring hub, and that single monitoring hub is in Croydon, and Matthew is here, and they run that on our behalf. So Matthew will come in just to talk a little bit about what the central hub does. But I would like to say we do have different wards across the whole of South West London. It's the focus of the monitoring hub that is central. But also, I think we've been on it a little bit longer than others. So I think it's always nice when you're forefront, but actually I think we've been doing it for a lot longer. And I think actually Sutton were way ahead a few years ago in kind of implementing some of this. So Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I mean, you've described it really well, and the Health Innovation Network are actually helping us with some analysis and sort of reviewing of how it's working, because what we have created is this single monitoring hub that allows each of the individual places to have patients that are remotely monitored on a standard form. But what it doesn't do is dictate to individual places how they manage the day-to-day patient load in their areas, because again, as we've been saying consistently, there are differences between those populations and they all require different things, and there are services set up, some very long-standing like Sutton Health and Care and some of the work in Croydon, some much earlier in their development, and having a single approach that combines everybody in the actual delivery on the ground, we're not sure is the right answer. but having a central monitoring hub which allows patients to go home from hospital earlier, to be managed in the hospital, managed in the community for longer, and therefore not requiring hospital care, is much better for those individual patients, much better for other patients who can then access acute care when they need it, and better for the system as a whole. So we think there is real value in that centralised monitoring, but as much value in individual places being able to run their virtual wards in a way that works well for their patients, their locale and their systems. And that's the sort of blended model that we're trying to develop. It is early days, whilst we have got experience over many years. The way we're doing it now with the centralised monitoring hub, which is now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is relatively new, and we're pleased and thankful for the HIN to be supporting that and others as we sort of analyse that and decide where we go next. This winter is going to be a key testing period because we're trying to upscale usage significantly to help with what undoubtedly will be a very challenging winter, as ever it is.
Thank you for that, Matthew. And Amanda, thank you very much for raising that. That's really, really helpful. And the work that we do in partnership with HIN across South London.
Mike, you had a lady here that had a...
Hi, my name's Charlotte. I'm from Real Staffing, but I'm actually a resident as well here. Obviously, finance is a massive constraint, but it's also a really big enabler for all of the services that are going to be put forwards. I just wanted to know what other enablers were going to be, put forwards in order to make sure that aside from finance, these services would be, continued, whether that be through more workshops, like the workshop that we saw, or what other enablers would be a focus.
So whilst Karen thinks of an answer to that one, because I think it's a complicated question, but an important one, Helen, do you want to say something about the scale of the challenge we're facing this year and the approach we're taking in terms of working with colleagues?
Obviously, we set ourselves a plan of an £8 million deficit, and we also have within that over £2 million. £100 million. Am I on?
I think your thing's working. Try again.
Am I on now?
Yes, that's it.
Sorry, I'll try that again. I think I'm getting feedback now. So obviously we've set ourselves a deficit plan this year, and within that there's an over £200 million saving plan requirement, which has brought us together to collaborate, to work out how we can provide services better, improve quality and streamline what we do whilst making the savings as well. So key in all of that is how do we make this a better place to work so that we have people that want to be with us and take themselves on their careers and go through that, and how can we support them in doing that as we go on that journey? How can we look at how productive we are in what we do so we can see more patients more quickly in the right places? So how do we improve our theatre utilisation? How do we improve what we do? And actually, how can we do that and give mutual aid to ourselves as a system in doing that, and working with our local authority colleagues? How can we make those pathways through into social care much easier, and looking at discharges, etc. So I think in order to make the financial savings and to address the financial challenge, actually what we need to do is to collaborate to make the services better, so the patient experience is better as we go through and drive that through.
Thank you. And did you want to say something about the enablers, or Charlotte, would you like to say something about the ongoing engagement? Karen.
So by the enablers, do you mean things like workforce and digital? Okay. So with workforce, there's a huge agenda with workforce. I mean, you can imagine, can't you, not only in the health service, but also in that wider partnership. So we're doing a whole range of workforce interventions at lots and lots of different levels, both at Place and South West London and in each of the hospitals and each of the health organisations. So if I give you an example, and actually there's a really important role that workforce plays in also reducing health inequalities and unemployment. So one of the responsibilities we have, or two, health inequalities and also then the kind of social and economic development. So we are working with the Mayor's Skills Academy to look at how do we target areas of huge deprivation, and how do we support and train people to become NHS and health and social care staff of the future. But also, how do we change the way that we recruit in order to do that? Because if you're somebody who doesn't work in the health service or doesn't understand how it works or know where to look, actually it's quite tricky getting in. So we're going to redesign everything that we do in terms of supporting people out of local unemployment and into employment, one of the examples. We're also looking at how do we stop people leaving, because we lose, from a retention perspective, we lose people often because they go and get promotion elsewhere or they want a different experience elsewhere. and we're going to be working across the health service and our wider partners to say, how could we create something more interesting so people don't have to leave South West London in order to get what they need that might be wider. So workforce, massive priority for us, looking at the health and well-being of our teams. You know, you saw everything that everybody went through during the pandemic. We've got tired staff, we've got industrial action, etc. We need to look and care for the people that provide care to others. So massive amount. I could go on, Mike, for a long time, but shall I give you those 3 examples? But I'm happy to talk to you outside if you want anything else.
And I think, you know, we should also celebrate the fact that I think now all of our trusts, if not all, there might just be one that is still on the journey, have become accredited London Living Wage employers, which has made a huge difference for significant, many hundreds of staff have seen a pay rise across South West London as a result of that, which I think is really, really important for some of our lowest paid staff. Did we want to touch upon digital? Who could we point to that would actually say something on the digital? John, of course, John. Come and stand up here, John. You can take the...
It's not working. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Byrne, Chief Medical Officer for South West London. In terms of digital enablers, we've just heard about the virtual ward, the remote monitoring hub, which is a really good idea of a simple innovation which will support people to live at home. Other things we're looking at are electronic patient records. So if you take primary care, they've been digitalised for over 30 years. So Epsom St Helier has a huge investment programme going in this year and next year. So when we have comprehensive electronic patient records, and I know that sounds a bit techy, we will have more data available, which means that people who are using health inclusion projects, as we discussed earlier on, are more able to access their own health data and book appointments, and we can only do that by joining up the system. So we have a combination of really big programs, as well as a combination of some of the smaller programs, which are aimed at either supporting small providers or patients to support looking after their own healthcare.
Can we give a plug for the NHS app as well?
Yeah,
NHS.
Yeah,
How
NHS
could I
app.
forget? Okay. So most of you during the COVID period would have been sort of familiar with the concept of a COVID pass on your app and sort of using your smartphone in a different way. We've had the NHS app for a while. It's been slowly but surely developed at a rapid pace, I have to say, which will enable all of us, those who choose that is, to access your health services through the NHS app. Now, there is always the risk of digital inclusion and exclusion falling into that, as we've discussed earlier. However, by the end of October, we're hoping that most of our practices will be in a position to share their information through the NHS app, so that when you or I, as citizens, go onto our NHS app, we're able to see our own data, we're able to sort of reorder prescriptions, and in some cases, as we develop the technology, actually book and change and alter our appointments as well. So the NHS app, which we do really well with it in South West London, has got to be the way ahead, but we are very mindful in terms of digital inclusion as well as exclusion, that we sort of we don't make it difficult for certain groups of people to miss out on healthcare. But as you saw from the example earlier on, actually it creates opportunities for other people to gain access to healthcare when they normally wouldn't have it through using digital methods.
What you may want to do is click onto the NHS app. You will probably already find, if you haven't clicked onto it since the COVID vaccination passes, there's already a lot more data functionality on it than there was during 2 years ago. And in South West London, that will be even more by the time we get to Christmas. So it's a great opportunity, but it is important that we work with projects like Tim's to make sure that when we extend the use of digital, that we're thinking about inclusion as well. Please.
Going on about digital. My name is Abdul, and I'm a trustee of a charity for elderly people in Merton. The majority of our members are over 85. Okay. For us youngsters, it's great. I'm 60. I can go digitally, order my prescription, read my notes, pick my appointment letters. But for the over 80s, that's very difficult. Very difficult. And what's happening at the moment, they're phoning the clinics for an appointment. The first reference is, can you go online and do an appointment? I help a lot of elderly people with digital training. Most of them haven't got smartphones. So it's a real big problem at the moment for people over 85. All right, 75, as my colleague says. But it's getting, in a sense, it's getting worse over the last year, because every time anyone phones a clinic anywhere, oh, go digitally. Make your appointments digitally. You go into the NHS app or whatever app they tell you to, and it then doesn't give you the calendar that's available to make appointments. So unless it's tailored to be very, very simple, then you're going to find a lot of elderly people will miss up on prescriptions, will not be going to doctors' clinics, and most of these elderly people also live on their own. So, you know, it's something that you need to look at.
No, you're absolutely right. We're going to hear from primary care.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you. That's a really important question. So I'm on the board, but I'm also a GP, and I think it's so digital. That digital front door that you're talking about is really important for us for two reasons. One, it helps us to get the right people into those face-to-face appointments and to deal with some of those other queries that patients have in a more efficient way, maybe a text message or a phone call. But what it also is really important in doing is freeing up our phones so that people who do find it difficult to use the digital front door, the digital opportunities, so that they can get through more easily on the telephone. So you're absolutely right. It is, the digital option is not there for people who find it difficult to use a digital means. It is there so that people who find it easy to do that can use that means instead and free up our telephones so that older people or other people who find it difficult to use digital means to get it through to their GP can still be dealt with on the phone. And people can still go to their GP practices as well. Don't forget, you know, the doors are not closed, the doors are absolutely open. If you are having difficulty, please do pick that up with your individual practice as well. But absolutely, the intention is not that those digital front doors create more digital exclusion. It is that they create an opportunity, more of an opportunity for those who can't use those digital means, but also freeing up the digital route so that we can deal with many more appointments on the day, so that we can triage people to the right solutions for them within the practice or direct them to other services if that is the most appropriate option for them. I hope that answers your question.
I suspect we'll come back to it. So I know it's a really live issue. And I do think, you know, do alert us if there are particular challenges, and we will always try and support you around those.
Sorry, I'm not hogging, but following on from that, I'm an older person, but I'm not a dinosaur as far as IT is concerned, fortunately. But the doctor lady there said about going, so I was given opportunity to, because I have asthma, so to have my reviews done. 3 times I kept going and it kept saying, there's none available. The same thing happened for my flu jab. Ultimately, I ended up either ringing the surgery or going there personally. I have a disabled son who is in the same boat. So some of it works, some of it, like this gentleman said, I support an older people's day group center. And my innovation fund, by the way, application was to encourage my older people to be a bit more digitally included. Fortunately, even though I didn't get the money from NHS, I got some money from the National Lottery. So we bought 20 gadgets, and now my members can actually, some of them who've been taught. But of course, I've got 180 members. So I'm thinking, well, yes, we all need money to be supporting our elders. And for most of my members, English is not their first language, just as it is not for me. So I think a bit more thought needs to be going. It's all very well for the youngsters here to say, oh yes, I get all my appointments done. So yes, there is still a long way to go, but I'm glad that at least it's moving forward.
I think what Annette said is absolutely right. We haven't got it sorted yet, and it's not every GP practice, so I'm going to be absolutely honest about that, you know, and they do all work slightly differently, with no negative kind of impacts to our local GPs who's sitting right opposite me, which I don't want to upset her. But, you know, a lot of our GP practices are really on top of this, and they really make sure that those that are digitally enabled can get in, and those that aren't can access really easily. You know, they want to make sure they answer the phones really quickly, or if you walk into the practice, they offer you an invitation in. That is how it's supposed to work. The idea is those that want to access digitally can, and that frees up the phones and the direct access for those that can't or don't want to. That's supposed to be the way it works. We're not quite there yet, I'm going to be absolutely honest. If you're really getting problems with your GP practice, talk to your GP practice, because generally sometimes they don't even know that it's an issue. So go in and talk to them. And if you've got a real problem with your practice, you can come to us and we will talk to them as well. So there is, you know, there are opportunities. I don't think we have to say everyone has to be digitally enabled. My father is 87, he can go on the PC himself and do it, but some of his friends cannot. And I think it's all up to the individual about how they want to access services, and that's what we've got to encourage, to make sure that we can support people however they wish to access our services.
Mark's going to say a couple of words as well.
And it's just building on Annette and Sarah's points, that there is also money available going into GP practices to update their telephone systems, so you don't have that kind of call back at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're number 17 in the queue. That actually we modernise the telephone systems for GP practices, and all our practices are signed up. There's still 70 to go to the new system, and that will be by March the 31st next year.
So a story of improvement, but still challenges.
Thanks. So quite linked actually to the digital. So just thanks for Del and Tim for their updates on those projects. I just really want to understand a little bit about how you're kind of measuring that impact, because although on Tim's project it's a different population, actually how can we use that learning and how can we galvanise that in South West London to really drive forward innovation kind of next steps? So I don't know if either of you want to say a few words about the evaluation and kind of how that's feeding into our kind of local, you know, further plans locally, and kind of obviously I know that one of them is published, so we can kind of use that evaluation, but how we really can kind of do that locally through these funds, especially when they're kind of, you know, multi-partnered and stuff and quite complex, because we just know it's so important.
So just to say a little bit about that, the way that we chose, when we took on the external evaluation that I mentioned, the focus of that was assessing the sort of confidence that people had at the beginning of the project. So, you know, how confident are you? Do you feel able to use digital at the beginning of the project? And then at the end to see if there'd been any change. I think that was probably the key measure we used, was how the person felt themselves about doing it. That was probably the main measure we used. So, and I think, as I said in the presentation, that a significant number of people in the project felt that they were more able to use digital than before. So I think that, I mean, perhaps there are other measures you could use, but that's the one that we felt was the most useful, was, you know, do you feel more confident? Are you going to use it? And by giving people opportunities through the project to try and build up those skills, and we hope that's been embedded. I mean, as I said in the presentation, it was a pilot, and we would love to do more, but perhaps we'll be submitting another application for the future.
And just from our point of view, there wasn't prescriptive in terms of we must measure this, and that was what was really nice about the fund, because we didn't have to jump through certain hoops to make sure the tick boxes were ticked. So ours was around working with the board about what we were reporting back, and we were saying, this is what we found. We found that appointments were less likely to be missed. We found that these many people were saying this X, Y, and Z, and the confidence, and we're having, you know, the youth workers coming to us saying less young people are approaching them. So it was more about working together to sort of say, this is what we found. Does that ring a bell with you? Because, you know, on one side you've got the experts and on the other side you've got us that are working with the local community. And so it's about bringing those two together to sort of say, does this ring a bell and does this help? So I actually quite like that because I have to deal with a lot of funders, and this one really helped us to try something new.
Nice question, though. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah, Southwest London Voluntary Community and Social Enterprise Sector Alliance, a very long title. It was really interesting to hear about the two projects funded through the Health Inequalities Fund. And what I was thinking while they were talking and following this discussion as well is how can we build on, you know, projects like this? Of course, it's a 3-month project, very innovative, brings in, you know, an evaluation with it. How can we bring more consistency into the future, kind of moving away maybe for successful projects from funding streams to contracting, commissioning of ideas you like for a longer period of 2-3 years. The voluntary sector in Southwest London is super rich, as you know. I always say we've got more than 5,000 organizations. We can bring innovation, we can bring prevention, and we can bring capital as well. In London alone, in 2022, we had about £475 million coming from grant-making trust and the lottery. So when you invest in the sector, you actually gain much more.
And I think that's really helpful, and that commitment around supporting and investing in our voluntary sector is there. I do think we have had some conversations in relation to the fund about actually, I know, hearing your comments about the joy of working with something which was sort of self-defined, but we are having conversations about how we might want to structure something more tightly in order that we can actually appraise it for long-term investment. Karen, did you want to say any more about that?
So I suppose the thing to just say about the kind of the innovation fund, we use the same heading, but it's got two parts to it. So John might want to say something about how we're taking forward some of the health inequality programmes from one year to the next year, because I think that does then build sustainable programmes. So one of the things that we have said is that we will publish, so we will review all the programmes that went through, and we will explain, you know, the things they delivered. And I suppose just taking Dale's point, some of it's really tangible and some of it's not quite so tangible. And I suppose when you're looking at innovation, it's important to realise that you're going to get successes, you're going to get failures, but also there's going to be things that you can really pin down and things that maybe you can't. So we did say for the innovation element of it that we would then publish those programmes and show what they've done. But this year they're going to do something different. So last year we were looking particularly at innovation that could support people during winter. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, the Innovation Fund for the ICP elements of the fund will be about delivering those 6 priorities that I mentioned earlier. So you're probably going to be comparing apples with pears, I think, probably for the innovation element of it. But for the health inequalities element, John, I know that you've done some work, haven't you, about making sure that we're thinking about what we take forward as well as what we do completely new. Do you want to say something about those?
So if I can just come back to the point about evaluation, there's something about knowing the cost of everything but the value of nothing. So certainly when you come around to smaller projects and pilots, thinking about metrics, not just people who've gone to sort of casualty or dialed for an ambulance or whatever, it's about that sort of user experience, whether you're a patient or you're attending a clinic. So just having a suite of sort of measures where what matters to you as a citizen we can actually capture, because that actually can demonstrate good value. With that in mind, we've got Catherine Heffernan, who comes from a public health background, who's designing a very simple framework where we can capture some qualitative and quantitative, which is like words and figures, in terms of knowing that the programs that we've got running over the past year or so are effective, because there is a tension here. This is public money, and we have to be able to demonstrate that we use our collective public money in a sensible way, but also in a transparent way. In terms of the Health Inequalities Fund this year, I can reassure you the money is there and we're absolutely going to spend it. What we've decided to do this year is one of the feedback we had from lots of smaller groups was inadvertently we can appear quite bureaucratic. Okay, so how do we simplify it for smaller organisations to be access that funding? So what we've done this year is quite simple. It might sound a bit arbitrary, but we think it makes sense. So we've said 3/4 of the funding this year for health inequalities will be reinvested in programmes which we invested in last year. So what we're going to do, though, is leave it up to places themselves to decide which of the programmes they would like to fund going forward, hopefully based on some sort of qualitative, if not quantitative, evidence. Okay? We've also asked the places to give us a programme which we think we could run at a South West London level and do it once across South West London based on the learning they would have picked up at place. So 3/4 of the money will go into sort of recurrent investment in those programmes that can demonstrate success at place, and then 25% will be held back for, dare I say it, new programmes or innovations which maybe weren't successful last year, or perhaps new emerging themes such as homelessness that we might be dealing with this year. So hopefully that will give a little bit of a clue about where we're going this year, but an absolute reassurance that our commitment is to this, and we are going to be spending that money again, but hopefully just removing some of the bureaucracy that was necessarily there around it last year.
Thank you for that. And we've got one more question.
Oh, hi, Dina Thacker, Community Pharmacy Clinical Lead for South West London. I was hearing a lot about digital exclusion and how patients can access service a little bit more. We had a really great access to innovation funding through community pharmacies, where we had 10,000 interventions through pharmacies over 5 weeks. And that was really accessing some of the problems that we have, looking at elderly populations and some of the digital bits as well. So I think some of the bits I had in terms of a question for yourselves was actually, how do we look at using community pharmacies, as we have 293 of them across South West London, as one of our partners going forward to support with some of the bits that we've had come up today with regards to accessing flu appointments, which community pharmacies already do, supporting with digital ordering of medicines, which could be something we could support in, and actually looking at things like asthma reviews, etc. as well.
So I'll say something briefly and then I might ask Mark to say something more. So I think absolutely, I think particularly during COVID and when we were doing the vaccines, the community pharmacy really came to the fore, didn't it? And our community pharmacies across South West London have been fantastic in helping us to deliver services. And I think there's a load of learning that we can do around how much more can community pharmacies do. And I can remember 20 years ago having these discussions about medicines reviews and so on. So there's a lot more that we can do with community pharmacies. What we have done recently is we've recently taken on responsibility for pharmacy from NHS England. So we are getting our heads around exactly what that looks like and what more we could do. And Mark might want to say something on that. But I think the potential, I would absolutely agree around the potential of what can be done in community pharmacy and the opportunity that's out there. But do you want to say something about what we're doing now?
So I suppose, and Dina will know this, is we've got, I think it's 217 practices signed up for hypertension case finding. So absolutely identifying those patients that come through the door who might be at risk of hypertension. We've also got a number of practices, a number of community pharmacists signed up for oral contraception. We have a pathway initiative coming, which again will focus on hypertension, but the treatment of hypertension rather than just the case finding, and then perhaps rolling that out to women's health as well. I think we brought primary care clinicians and our community pharmacists together to really try to examine some of the possibilities and the opportunities, particularly around treating people and keeping people healthy. And one of our comms priorities for this year is around, through the winter, the Pharmacy First kind of project as well. So I think there's lots of work that we could be doing and tapping into community pharmacy to be a more active part in people's treatment and care.
Thank you for that, Mark and Sarah. I mean, it is, I think it remains still an untapped pool of fantastic talent and probably the most accessible part of the NHS. So I'm really pleased that we have plans afoot to move in that space. On that note, positive, upbeat note, I'm going to draw this meeting to a conclusion. So we've dealt with the formal business of presenting the annual reports and the accounts for both South West London CCG and for South West London Integrated Care Board. Thank you all for your attendance. There are feedback sheets on the desk. This is our first AGM, so we'd be really pleased to get comments on what you liked about it, if anything, what you hated about it, if anything, so that we can make sure that next year's event is even better. I'd like to give a big thank you to our two speakers from funded projects today. I think you've really made it feel real and come alive for us. I'd like to thank my ICB board colleagues for their work over the past year and their support that I get every day from them. Really, really appreciated. But we are all about partnership. So a big thank you to all of the staff in whichever organisations that work in our NHS organisations, our partners in the community, our partners in local authorities, and actually a thank you to the community we serve. It's actually the reaction from the people that we serve that makes it all worthwhile for us. Big thank you today. Safe journeys home. Look forward to seeing you in 12 months.